Before we get into this week's episode, I want to put out a warning as we talk about some subjects that might be triggering for others. Hi Charlie.
Hi Gabrielle.
Welcome to Gift of the Gab.
Thank you very much.
How are you feeling today?
Good, a little bit hungover,
Yeah.
but I think I'm a convert to vodka lime sodas. 'Cause I definitely feel a lot better than had I had the equivalent amount of beer.
Yeah,
So.
honestly that does hydrate you, still gets you drunk,
It does.
but it's a good balance.
Yeah, it leaves a nice little taste in your mouth.
Exactly.
I rate it.
Do you want to introduce yourself, Charlie?
This camera here, or
Yeah, go for it. You can look straight into the lens.
I don't know
I
I don't know if I want to make eye contact.
just look at me, don't worry.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so I'm.
You're all good.
I don't have like a sentence really to sum myself up, I suppose.
I mean, it is a bit hard if someone puts you on the spot.
Yeah.
And like, what?
What do I consider myself as? I guess. Well, I work in like. I just moved to London, so I work in like PR. We went to school together. That's how we
we
know
did.
each other.
You were 2 years above me.
Correct.
Your little sister was a year below me.
Yep.
But I don't think I've ever spoken to you apart from.
Not really. No. Yeah. It's kind
Never.
of like.
But I went to a big school.
Yeah, I think like I suppose I consider myself as like a writer, I guess. But I always think I feel iffy about labels sometimes, or like I think when you're not making money out of something, it can kind of be like, well, why would I say that I am this when I'm like it's not a career? But then I'm like, maybe I don't need to make money out of it. Like I enjoy writing, and that's what I consider myself as, or that's what my craft is. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like I can say that I'm a podcaster because I don't get paid for it yet.
No, see, I just like I think I disagree with that, because I think like especially now with like the way arts are going, there's like an element of there needs to be a financial side to this, and I think that what that ends up doing is a lot of people can't finance the initial startup phase of like getting your name out and getting the exposure and all that kind of stuff. So I think if you think of yourself as a podcaster, call yourself a podcaster.
But then again, that could go like the opposite way of someone that's like recorded one episode and then gave up and it's like, yeah, I'm a podcaster. Do you know what I mean?
This is true. I mean,
I'm like,
I guess
where's
it just
the line?
depends. Where
Do you
is
know
the
what I
line?
mean?
That is true.
Because also I feel like a bit of a gimp when people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, I podcast. Do you know what I mean? Because there's such negative connotations around it just now. I don't know. I feel like...
What kind of negative connotations do you think there are?
Like... Maybe not, like, I just get a lot of comments on like TikTok being like, not everyone needs to start a podcast. Do you know what I mean? I think it's more the fact that people think that anyone's just doing it now, and that like I feel like you really need to like, you know, push at it, because a lot of people give up. So then a lot of people are just like, whatever, like everyone starts a podcast, doesn't really mean anything. Like when does it get to a point where you're like, you're established? You know what I mean? That's
true. I think with like the good news about it, it's one of those like kind of art forms where it's really easy to pick up and play. Like anyone can have a conversation, and anyone can buy a mic and have a conversation in front of a mic. I think that like it's probably a good thing though. I think like the kind of saturation is meaning that the diversity of stuff, and you've got a lot of different styles. Some stuff is more kind of educational, other people kind of tell stories, other people are kind of having like discussions and conversations about important topics. So I don't know, like I just think like, yes, there is that element of like, oh, who needs another podcast, here we go. Like, but I think overall like it's a great thing, and I think sometimes I'm not always in the mood to listen to music, like just having two people speak, you kind of have that sort of strange dynamic where even though you're sitting out in it and it's almost like a fishbowl and you're like looking in on it, you still feel like you're part of the conversation, and I think that's like quite a cool thing.
It is. I really like the way that you put that.
Yeah, thank you.
So back to your writing, when did you first get into that? Like, were you really into English at school?
Yeah, I was. So it was really weird actually. I had so I used to live in the Middle East, and so we moved out to...
You used to live in Dubai.
I used to live in Dubai,
yeah.
So we moved there when I was 6, and I went to an international school with a lot of like students who English was their second language. And for some reason, I think because I was a bit like disruptive and like not even like naughty, but just like I have a lot of energy, and I think when I was younger, I've like struggled to like contain that energy a little bit. And I think I got like highlighted for further English study because I was falling behind. So I ended up like going to these extra classes at certain times of the day. This was in like P2, and like I was with there was this one girl who could only read writing if it was written in a mirror. Like so if it was like written the wrong way around. So she used to write letters in like mirror image, And then there was another boy that like he really struggled to like put sentences together, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, no offense, but I should not be here.
Wait, and I'm sorry, what mirrored writing? That's how she would write.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's quite crazy, you know. And I think like, but it's interesting the way that kids' minds work, and like they pick up stuff. And I think with people like that, it's really good if there is extra support. I don't know if I think I just felt singled out, and I never understood why I was there. And then there was one summer that I remember actually where it was actually following that year where they were like, what if Charlie wrote a kind of diary entry every day about the things he got up to in summer, and we would always come back to Scotland and kind of spend the summers in Glasgow. So I
was gonna say you still got the Scottish accent even though you were in Dubai with the
I mean it's definitely something that like I've always wanted to kind of hold on to, and like I've always, well, even when I was there like the whole time, I just didn't really like living there that much.
Fair. So your diary entries in the summer were you happy?
Enjoying myself, like spending time with family, and it was a bit like annoying that, you know, we would come home from the day and then my dad would like sit me down and be like, here's how you write this, and try and like develop some ideas with me and stuff. And I think following on from that, I just really like got into reading and like just read a crazy amount like all the time. Like I was just always like reading books, like every night I would read like half an hour to an hour. And just I think with stuff like art forms, whether it's like whatever you're doing, if you're taking in enough enough input into you, like, so in my case words, then the output kind of eventually sort of comes out, and you don't realize it, but you borrow elements of what you've written, even if it's like subconscious, and it's just kind of taking it from there. And I think like going through school, I kind of had like different ideas of like how to develop essays, and I was always very ambitious with my writing. I would always want to like take it further and further, and I think sometimes in school that was tamped down a bit. It was like, no, just stay in this lane. But I definitely enjoyed like going off to uni and then developing kind of essay skills, and it started off kind of being like, you know, word vomit, getting down all the ideas, and then it started being more creative. So I think one of the first ones where I really noticed this kind of change happening in the way I was writing was like this essay I did in third year politics, and it was about how Donald Trump had borrowed ideas from like WWE and like used them in like his like rhetorical style, and how he like used that to win the election.
Wait, yeah, talk about this. Sorry.
Yeah, so the basic idea, it's not my idea, mind, but it was I was pulling together different strands from other people that had already developed it. The basic idea is that in wrestling, you've got, I can't remember the terms for it. There's one guy that's like obviously the good guy that everyone wants to win, and there's one guy that is, I can't remember the term, but it's like they're the bad guy, and they're meant to rouse up the crowd a little bit and kind of play into like the villain narrative. And when you start to draw all the kind of sinews of that and the parallels that sort of exist, you sort of realize like just how strong, like how strongly obvious it is that it's like theatrics, and it's not based on kind of policy anymore. It's based on sort of the showmanship of it all. And then once it becomes that, then I think the kind of traditional stuff that we have sort of breaks down a little bit. And that's why he breaks the rules and gets away with it, is because he's not playing by the same rule book anymore.
That must have been a very interesting essay.
It was, and I that started to grade me very well, because it was like developing these things. And then when I graduated, I was just left like without any. It was COVID, first of all, so it was like deep in COVID. I had my like last semester cut off, and I was just like really. Rubbish. It was rubbish. I feel good that I've had like the whole uni experience, and I feel worse for like younger people that maybe didn't have a freshers week, or my sister started in first year, and then now COVID's stopped, but it's like fourth year and she's doing her dissertation, so that's worse. That's objectively more shit.
She's not had like the full experience that people have in the UK. But maybe that's better, because then she'd like buckle down and study, do you know, because there's nothing else to do.
But I think
it's still like I think it's a detrimental part of growing up if you go to uni, is to be able to experience all this, kind of like get stuff out your system, like have fun, meet people and stuff. I
would say, because I think those like soft skills and the kind of the sort of exchange of ideas that happens between like different personalities, and you can kind of gravitate towards really more people that it's like less about circumstance and more like, no, I like actually just want to hang out with you. Whereas I think school can sometimes create like sort of funnier social relationships.
Well, I also think because school, like, you're stuck with those people. Like,
Yeah.
you can't really escape them. You're literally with them every day. And if
Yeah.
you don't like someone in your class, you still need to see them every day.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's kind of good because, like, it's a life skill that you have to just put up with people that you don't like and just kind of get on with it. Because, like, in every, like, aspect of your life, there's going to be people that you don't like. You can't expect everyone to like you.
Absolutely.
And you're not going to like everyone.
Yeah.
But growing up with that, I think was, like, it's difficult. Because at uni, you can just kind of be like, I don't like you. Like, I don't have to, like, hang out with you outside.
You can be a bit more kind of, like, selective. And I think that does... Yeah, I mean, that's really the beauty of it. And I think that's why a lot of people have such a great time at university, is because of that sort of, like... You can kind of prune who you want to, like...
Yeah.
You realise who your true friends are. And you can lean on people, and you're away from home, and suddenly your friends become really more of, like, a family structure, like, within your flat or within, like, your wider friend group, like, helping each other out through breakups and through just all the horrible stuff that does happen at uni. As much as it is fun, the trade-off of that is also that, you know, bad things do happen. And I think, like, it's nice to be able to lean on friends in that kind of way, in a way that you maybe wouldn't have done at school.
So I think going off of that, like, leaning on friends and stuff, because obviously your dad passed away quite recently. Yeah. And I read your eulogy that you did for your dad and at your dad's funeral, and it was one of the most incredible things I think I've ever read in my life, and it has affected me so deeply. And it really, when I read it, like, I really sobbed, to be honest. And I read it out to, like, myself in my room, and then I shared it with all my friends. I literally sent it to everyone, sent it to my mum, like, into my family group chats, to all my pals. And when you were talking about, like, leaning on friends through hard times and, like, finding who your real friends are, I think, like, a moment like that, like, when I sent it to those people, I was like, these are people that I lean on, and they'll be able to read it and understand, if you know what I mean.
I know what you're saying.
And and I think, going off of that, how has that been, like, friendship wise? Like, because I think with grief, you can really lose friends sometimes.
Yeah,
I mean, it really shows, like, people's true colours, I think.
I would say, because I think it's, I don't know, first of all, it's the stage of life that it's happening at. So I think I'm one of the first people, definitely not the first, but one of the first people my age to have, like, lost a parent. At least within my friend group.
With your peers?
Yeah, within my peer group. There's a few. Like, I have friends that have lost parents. I'm not trying to say that, you know, I was the first out the gate, that there have been people before. But I think that the kind of difficulty of it is that people they want to be very careful with how they approach you, and you sense that caution off of them. And I get the sense that you're kind of like me, you don't mind speaking about it, otherwise we wouldn't be on a podcast. But I think, like, for me, I do like speaking about it, and I will make that known to people, and I want to make them, not like that I have any responsibility to do so, but I like speaking about it. And if other people can be comfortable around me bringing it up and bringing up memories of him or chatting about him, like, that's my way of, like, keeping his memory alive. And my friends have been really good. Like, I think my younger sister's had, I think she's just at a different stage of life. Like, she's 3.5 years younger than me. So if I think of my friends 3.5 years ago, they might not have been as good as they would have been, like, you know, last year and this year. But that's just like an age thing. I think you kind of, people get a sense off of it. And I'm, like, just tremendously lucky. Like, when I was in Dubai, like, I didn't have, like, that many pals at school. And that was kind of tough. I used to spend, like, a lot of, like, weekends just, like, by myself, like, playing computer games, which is not a great place to be in. So now when I look around me and I've just got, like, a very, very good group of pals, you feel very fortunate, and I've lent on them in ways that I know that if the same happened to them, they could lean on me.
Of course.
And it's great to have, like, a very wide circle of friends who not just support you, but can support your family as well. Like, my friends have sent flowers, and, like, they've been over to visit, and I mean, you just really, like, you realize, like, just this is what having friends is all about. Because, like, it's all fun and games going on nights out and having a laugh, but when those bad things happen, those, like, major life events, you need people that are gonna be your kind of anchors and like keep you grounded and not let you kind of slip away into ruminating about things too much.
How long ago was it?
10 months ago now, which is like, it's kind of like COVID. Like, it's like warped my perception of time. Like, I can't grasp that it was more than 10 months ago now. That just doesn't really compute.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It does that to you. You're just like, wait, where did that time go?
Yeah. What about yourself? When did your dad pass?
A year ago, 4 days before Christmas Day.
Right, Christ.
Which was fucking shite. But so that's like a year and what, like 4 months, which is insane. And his birthday's coming up too, and I'm like, it's just a lot. But it's just, I can't believe it's been a year and 4 months. Like, it's just so weird to me that it's gone past this quick. Yeah. You know?
And it feels quite like abstracted as well. Like, maybe you've got, I'm just only speaking from personal experience, but because my dad, I mean, he took his own life. So that's obviously, it was a crime scene. It was treated as a crime scene for the first like few days. So we couldn't even go around his flat. But I've not seen his body. I've not, there's been no tangible evidence of him passing other than his absence, if that kind of makes sense. If I go around to his flat, I can like be there, and it's so obvious that he's not there, so like that feels real. But then anything else doesn't, because my parents were split up. He was always living in the West End and I was in the South Side, so he was always on the other side of town. And I think sometimes the human mind needs that tangible evidence, and when it doesn't have it, it can kind of just get sort of like stuck floating around, like sort of needing evidence to latch onto, if that sort of makes sense.
I think there's like a bit of confusion because you're kind of just expecting them to show up one day.
Yeah.
And like you wouldn't be that shocked if they did, because you're like, what's going on? And you're kind of stuck in this weird limbo. Yeah. Like I still expect my dad to just like walk through the door sometimes and come and get the dog. Yeah. My parents were split up too. When did your parents split up?
That would have been when I was 17, but it was like, yeah, I probably don't want to like air their dirty laundry, but
no, of course.
It was. I think it would be fair to say that it wasn't like the healthiest of marriages. Like, or I always got a sense that my parents' marriage wasn't as like healthy as other parents.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah,
so
I was around the same age.
Yeah, so I think when it did happen, I was actually like vaguely glad about it, because I was kind of like, well, it's probably for the best. Like, I really want you two to be happy, and that's probably better if you're separated, then you can pursue your happiness. Kind of thing.
And they were good friends after?
Yeah, they were actually. Yeah. I feel really lucky because we still had like a family group chat, and we would go for dinners and stuff, and like I find that really like it was normal for us because it just felt right. But I think other people, when I speak to them, maybe their parents didn't have the same.
Yeah, because I think it's crazy. We've had quite similar experiences. Like my parents, but they were still really good friends.
Yeah, that's
my
great.
mum was like his main carer before he passed away, and I think like thank God, do you know what I mean? Like, but in a way I think because he had cancer, that brought us together, because we realized how short life is and like how precious it actually is. Because I think like my dad had an affair, and like obviously like as you would be, my mum was fucking raging about it, but then he was diagnosed with cancer. So I think in a way, which is like kind of messed up, it was like the glue that kept us together, because we were like, he's dying, like we have to make the most of this.
Yeah. So
everything was kind of put aside, and like whatever, it happened, it's done, they're not together, but like we're gonna still stick together as a family. Like we still had the family group chat, we'd go out for dinners. My dad like lived with us like towards the end, to be honest.
Wow, yeah.
But he was in my bed, which made me really like that's brutal, to be honest, like when your dad's like dying in your bed. Oh yeah, so
I was wanting to ask you about that, because I think this is probably an interesting comparative point. So for me, it was a huge shock and a huge surprise. Like I was literally in town with, I agreed to meet one of my friends who was basically moving out to the Middle East. So I was like, oh bro, like I used to live in the Emirates, like I'd be really keen to have a chat with you before you go. I don't know when I'll next get to see you. So we went out for pints, and like I knew my dad was like going for a bad way, but we'd agreed to like play some tennis at the weekend. And as it turns out, he had agreed with a lot of other people to do things at the weekend, and I think that was kind of like a smokescreen sort of thing, which is quite sad to think about. And then it was really strange. Like my phone was ringing, and I was like, I don't really like going on my phone when I'm with friends, so I was having a chat with him. I was only like one pint in. And like my phone kept buzzing, and I can't explain it, but like I genuinely just knew what had happened, like from my phone ringing, and it kept going, and it was like just like a swell of like holy fuck, this is like happened. And I don't know, like, because there's always been that risk with him. Like with my dad, like I've been around his flat before when he basically was like kind of angling and sort of saying that it was something he might do. I've like driven around his flat in a hurry and like been there for him and stuff in the past. So that's always, once that happens once, it hangs over you all the time, and you think about it. And it was like that got activated the minute I felt my phone ringing, and I just thought, Jesus fuck, like once I pick up this phone, my life is going to change forever. And that's like a really sad, like I was listening to my friend, or trying to listen to my friend, but like my attention was getting, like I was looking him in the eye, but like my attention was getting like drawn to this like bit of news that was going to burst into my life and like just change it. And then my uncle came and picked me up in town. We had a very quiet kind of trip home, kind of driving from like Bath Street back to the south side, and I just like the whole time, like just everything's playing out in very slow motion. And once I got the confirmation when I got home, like that was just a huge shock. It just came out of nowhere. I suppose what I wanted to ask, from kind of recalling that story and the shock of it, because that did just completely, it was blindsided, like I think it was like a Friday morning, and that just happened. What was it like, kind of, if you don't mind speaking about it, like course. The anticipatory grief, is that like... The grief before someone dies is so different to the grief afterwards. Like I feel like that was even worse, because I was just watching like my dad like just change completely, and just kind of just watched him like wither away. And I don't even really know how to put it into words, because you're just constantly on edge. You're just like waiting for it. Like you're like, oh, it's happening. Like you said, like you've always got this looming thing over you, like with your dad. Like it's just always there. You're just waiting for it to happen. And they'd go through like bad spells where we were like, well, it's gonna happen, and then he'd be fine. Yeah. Like which, like, is so fucked, because like it's so unfair. Like, don't put us through that for it to lift back up again. Do you know what I mean? And it's just, and I think the whole thing with like, even with you though, like, but cancer, like it just, like it doesn't, like it just rips people apart. Like it doesn't stop for anyone. Yeah. Like it will come, and then it'll go away, then it'll come again, and it doesn't stop, and it's just constantly like trips to the hospital. Like my dad overdosed on morphine because he was taking it for his pain, and like that was just like little things like that, which all just like connected to this bigger picture. It was just like a whole saga. Really, it was just everything was constant. It was just non-stop. And then one time the pharmacy messed up the medication and like nearly killed him. Jesus. Yeah, we were like, shouldn't say that, like beat that. But round the corner from us, the pharmacy near our house, they like nearly killed my dad. My dad was like, we'll be going there again. Yeah, I was like, should I, like my dad was like, should we sue? And I was like, I've got bigger things to think about right now. Like it was just constant, and I think that grief was even worse than now in a way, because now at least it's happened and I'm not waiting for it to happen. Like I totally get what you mean. There's like a horrible catharsis in it where like it's by no means good, and you probably wish that you could even just have, even if he was just on his deathbed, just like more time, even if it was like tormenting you, just like having him. So I kind of like it's tricky, because like on the one hand, because I'm now like, he is at peace, because the amount of people that are like, oh, but at least he wasn't in pain, like that annoyed me. My dad was in so much pain. My dad was in pain for 6 years, and he was in the most horrific, awful pain while cancer literally ate his body for the last like month of his life. He was in constant pain. Yeah. And it annoys me when people are like, oh, but at least he died peacefully. No, he didn't. He died horrifically. Yeah. And that pisses me off so much. Yeah. Because like, and I know people are just trying to be nice, but I'm like, no, don't sugarcoat it. And in a way, I'm like, thank God he's not in pain anymore, because that was one of the worst things, was seeing how much pain he was in. He was just constantly like, just, it was awful. But when he died, I felt relieved. I was like, this is it. It's over now. Yeah. But now I need to go into this next stage of he's not here. I suppose when there's that inevitability aspect of it, where it's coming and it's coming, and you know it's coming, and it's not. It would take probably a miracle for it to turn around. I think that. Yeah, it's not something that it's two different journeys, but at the same time, I suppose there's that similarity of with my dad, like he was mentally ill my entire life.
Oh, really?
My entire life. And what's really interesting is like, so he's left all of his diaries, like from, I mean, they're kind of patchy, like there's a few years that are missing, but I think from the ages of 12 to 14 and then 19 to 23, daily diaries.
Wow.
From that time.
And he, even, so literally from like the age of, like, what did you say, 12?
Yeah, 12 to 14, so like kind of going into secondary school level.
So he struggled then as well?
Reading, so like I used to do teaching, so I think I kind of have like a level of like looking out for kind of clues and signs, and obviously if you're teaching a class of 30, it's actually really hard to pick up on that stuff. But if it's a wee boy's diary and you're able to read that, you're starting to see all the patterns of stuff that like really is gonna kind of escalate. And I sort of feel sad because I look at his the ones I've read so far are half of his 12-year-old diary, which is less upsetting, and then like a little bit of his 19 diary, which is like, it's really hard to explain because there's nothing necessarily upsetting in it, but like I spot all the little clues and the little early signs of patterns that would then snowball into really bigger issues. I'll give you an example. Like when he was 19, his granddad died, and he basically was like, I'm really annoyed because now I have to stop studying to go up and like to Aberdeen for this funeral. He was obviously upset about his granddad dying, but his first sort of initial thought was, how am I going to study? And he was such a driven person in that kind of way, and I think that's kind of sad because he really held himself to standards that when he fell short of them, it was just catastrophic. Like he would really beat himself up about stuff. And I sort of wonder because like I see similar signs, not the same stuff, because we've lived different childhoods, and your parents do pass on stuff to you as well.
Oh,
but
definitely.
I think that had he been born now, and like with our generation having more of the emotional toolkit and being more kind of articulate with how we can like express ourselves, I sort of wonder like, would he have turned out the same way?
That's a very interesting point. Probably not.
No. And I think because I mean you look at as recently as like the early noughties, and then you've got like Britney Spears and like Lily Allen all like suffering from like mental health issues
so publicly as well.
So publicly, and there's just like this is not that long ago. This is like 15 years ago even.
And people just rip them apart.
Yeah, and
which
like
is insane.
And it was seen as like kind of like fodder for the newspapers of like, oh, this is Amy Winehouse just like lashing out press, and it's like she had bulimia. She's like literally like suffering from like severe self-esteem issues.
Yeah, and also she's like an alcoholic. She's a young girl. People seem to forget that. And
I feel really pessimistic about loads of stuff like in society, but I think one thing that maybe is going well, and I wonder if it's happening out of necessity, just because things are getting like so intense with the news and with like social media and all this kind of stuff.
Do you think it feels more intense now? Did you always feel like it was intense, or do you think since your dad's passed everything feels a lot more grey?
It's kind of tricky really, because it like sort of in the same way that he processes granddad's death, I kind of with him like it's the same stuff that I've been like, so I've had issues with like OCD in the past like from a very early age that I didn't really notice, and then that kind of strengthened at uni, and it's something that I'm like working through now.
What was it in particular?
Just like, it's kind of hard to explain. I've actually written about this on my blog. Shout out Inertia blog.
Yeah, definitely go give it a read.
Yeah,
really, really love
definitely,
it.
I've written about it, and I think that is a much more articulate way of me saying it. But as a kind of rundown, I think people's views of OCD are based on like the compulsions. So things like I don't know, keeping things symmetrical or doing things in a certain order, double checking things, ritualizing stuff, like all of these little things. And then and people will be like, oh yeah, like I just love my house being neat, I'm so OCD.
I hate that.
Yeah, and it's like really irritating because it's like, I don't think that you mean anything badly from that. However, you saying that means that when I was going for uni, I was like, oh well, I'm not like that clean or tidy, but I was dealing with like really bad obsessions of like harming other people, and like basically the way it works is like intrusive thoughts will come into your head. So like I remember I had this like one day where like everything just like erupted in like first year, and I was like walking back from the uni, and I was like just terrified I was going to hurt someone, and I was like avoiding everyone, being like, I saw this woman with a pram, and I was like, I'm gonna like push her over, and like I don't know like how I need to like get away from her, and like it's weird because those obsessions are just based on like what you fear the most. So I would fear like hurting someone else. So it's like you get then intrusive thoughts about like just like things that you don't want to do or don't want to say or don't want to think, and then you'll maybe do compulsions to try and like soothe that anxiety, but by doing the compulsions you then kind of get yourself on a wheel of like constantly correcting the anxiety again and again, and it can get pretty like intense.
Do you think your dad had this?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I sort of wonder with stuff like that, like with him, so he had bipolar disorder, which used to be called manic depression.
Manic depression, what an awful way of wording it.
Yeah.
Manic depression.
I mean,
did not know
yeah,
that.
because it's
That's
based
horrible.
it's based on like cycles of moods. So that's really tricky being like a child and having a caregiver that is very cyclical in terms of like, and it's a shame because like when my dad was like between phases, he'd be like in the middle of it all, and he was just like he was a really nice man, but the manicness would then bring out a very selfish and very blinkered person who just kind of this ego would come in that would just kind of take over, and he would like stop listening to other people and like make really bad decisions. And then on the flip side, he would then crash down. But the problem is that if you do that enough, you've pissed off all of your support network while you're in your manic phase, and then you drop down and you're depressed, and no one wants anything to do with you because you've just pissed everyone off. And that must have been just awful to deal with.
When was he diagnosed with bipolar?
Oh, I mean, I think they picked it up as depression for a while, and this is the problem with, I think, when we're chatting about would he be better now, I think that would be picked up on a lot sooner.
Yeah.
But the problem was, I think that they were like, oh, like you just have depression, and then I think maybe the kind of manic depressive label came in, but I mean, a lot of people didn't really know that. Like I spoke to my sister after it, and she didn't know that, because especially with the relabeling, so he was told that he had manic depression, but then actually that is now, I think, I don't know if it's bipolar type 2 or type 1, but okay. There's like levels to it. So there's either the kind of, I think one of them's more like short-term bursts. My dad was more like month-long cycles of like being really, really high and then really, really low.
That must have been really difficult for you as a kid.
Yeah, massively.
Must have been very, very difficult.
I only feel like I'm like reckoning with it like a bit now, and like I think the most important thing is like he really pissed me off like a lot of times when he was manic. Like I have every reason to like be mad at him for that, and I think like I've got to find a place of like forgiveness that can't really be done in sort of cooperation with him anymore. And I don't know about your relationship with your dad, but have you like struggled with, I suppose, like having those kind of like unresolved conflicts? Do you think that there was any of that, or did you have a very good relationship with him?
No, we had a lot of my family's had a lot of ups and downs, and because my dad had an affair, I was the one that found out, and I was 14.
Christ.
Yeah, so like I was very angry with him for that for a long time. My dad, like you, when it came to like studying and stuff, he was put so much pressure on me and my brother when we were growing up, especially when it came to school and stuff, because he was the first person in his family to go to uni, which is obviously a huge achievement, but like he had these massive high standards for us, and he put a lot of pressure on us. And in a way, I know my dad struggled a lot with his mental health. His mum died of cancer when he was 12.
Christ.
His dad died of cancer. Like, he was just surrounded by cancer when he was growing up too. He had a hard time in school. He came from a really small place in Ayr, and growing up there, like after his mum died, like no one really talked about her just because like they couldn't handle it, didn't really know what to do with it. So he had like a tough time, and then he took that out on me and my brother. And then so yeah, like I'd say in a way I'm still angry at my dad for some of the stuff, and I'm still working through it. And like I've got a great therapist and I've got like a great support network, but like it's shit because those are things that we won't ever be able to talk about and like ever squash, you know.
That's probably one of the hardest things to deal with, really, because it's like we just had so much really still hadn't talked about. Like, this will be a bit upsetting for me to speak about, but I think I do kind of want to bring it up because, like,
if you want to stop, we can.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I was listening to a podcast, and there was these two guys that had been in prison, and then they now run their own podcast. They were chatting about it, and they were basically saying, like, because they had an absent father, and they were like, when I had kids, like, no one told me how to be a dad because I didn't have anyone to pass down that, like, wisdom, and that makes me quite sad because it's like I'll probably figure it out, and I'll have other, like, men that I really respect and look up to, that I can ask. There's just something about the way that, like, I suppose I have the memories and they'll be the best guidance I have, but, like, he was just like, here's another thing, we also really, like, quite strongly think that he was undiagnosed, like, on the autistic spectrum.
Oh, really?
And this is something I've spoken about, and I think, like I said, with my teaching, like, through the kind of the knowledge of, like, neurodivergency and stuff, I really strongly think so, because he would say things that were really unhelpful if you're, like, a young, because sometimes you just want your kid just wants to be, like, told that they're the best, and that's, oh, good for you. Like, he was always, like, very honest, but he wouldn't mean to hurt your feelings, but he was so honest that he would. And he was also very awkward and, like, extremely obsessed with numbers and dates. Like, if you told him, hi, my name's Gabrielle and my birthday is this, he would only remember your birthday.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and every day he would, like, send us, like, every few days he would send us a text, like, this is, like, this so and so thing happened 63 years ago, and, like, it's
he's like, cheers, Dad.
Yeah, it's like, thanks to that. Anyway, but yeah, no, I mean, like, so I think with all the evidence of that, because it is a spectrum thing as well, he was obviously quite high functioning in that sort of sense. But I definitely.
It must have really impacted his marriage with your mother then. That must have been tough for her.
Yeah, a little bit.
Especially raising two kids.
Oh, massively.
Away from Scotland.
Yeah.
That must have been really hard.
It's pretty tough, and I think, like, I mean, I've got nothing but, like, utter respect for both of my parents, because, like, as much as, things do go wrong in family situations, then family separation is never going to be easy. But I think, like, yeah, we've
handled it very well.
We've handled it very well. I can't really remember where I was going with the point about my dad, but I think, like, yeah, it's sort of about trying to see your parents in context and, like, kind of the lives that they've lived. And, I will go back to those diaries and read them more, because I think it's so interesting to hear his perspective as a young man. And, like, he'll write about, like, seeing a friend, or, like, maybe, like, a family member that I know, but, like, they're also really young as well, so I get, like, little tidbits about that. Yeah. I don't know, I'm quite like an archivist. Like, I really like those kind of sort of objects that have, like, a lot of significance attached to them.
Yeah, completely. I think it's incredible that he had diaries from the age of 12.
They're so extensive.
Insane. And also, yeah, as much as it's sad, it's really nice that you have that.
It is so nice.
And obviously there's going to be stuff in there that's very difficult to read, but there's going to be stuff that you're like, oh, that's so nice. Yeah. Like, so nice to read that, or, like, about his family and about his friends, about, like, if he's had a good day and things. It's nice to look back on, and it's nice that you've got that to hold on to. And, like you said, like, you're going to go back and read them, but there's no rush,
There isn't, yeah. As long as I safeguard them and stuff, yeah, like, that's the main thing. And I think that's the other important thing, probably, maybe you found the same, is just, like, just take stuff at your own pace. Like, if you don't want to deal with stuff now, you can at some point, just as long as you, like, don't, shovel stuff under the carpet and think that it'll go away on its own, because I don't think it does.
I think, going back to, like, our generation, I think it's much easier for us, like, because I think about how my dad was, but his mum, that was very much just under the carpet, not talked about. Like, he was only 12, and I remember one of the last things he said to me whenever I'd bring up his mum, like, we hardly spoke about her, and whenever I'd bring her up, he'd instantly cry. Like, so there was all this, like, unresolved feeling,
and that doesn't go anywhere. That sits there, and
it will sit there. But he never ever spoke about it. Never went to therapy or anything. So every time he spoke about it, he would just get so upset, and we couldn't really talk about it. And one day, and then I never obviously pushed it further, because I was like, no one wants to see their dad cry. No. I never pushed it. And then, like, a couple months before he died, I was like, why don't we talk about it? And he was like, because we never talked about it. Like, as soon as she died, they never spoke about her again, which is, like, beyond me. But then back then, like, you know, like what, like, it's also not surprising. And I think we're so lucky to be living like this now that we can, like, I mean, obviously people are going to find things hard to talk about, but I think it's a lot easier than back then when, like, my dad was clearly depressed but had no idea what was going on. Yeah. And it must have been so hard for your dad.
Yeah, massively, because no one understands it.
Especially if you think he was on the spectrum. So he was dealing with all of this. Yeah. Like, it's so unbelievably sad. Yeah,
and the way I've always explained it, because I think there's another thing as well. I've listened to some other stuff from, like, psychologists on grief and stuff. Grief can be made a lot harder if there's stigma attached to the cause of death itself. So, for example, suicide would have been a very, very stigmatized topic even 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
100%.
And that makes it very tricky. But, like, the way I think about it is he won battles against all of that stuff every single day for years, for literally decades. Like probably since he was like like in his 20s. And I think with stuff like that, like, he just had to lose once. You know?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he persevered through so much hardship and all the stuff just kind of sloshing around his head and not having, like I said, that toolkit.
Yeah.
And I just sort of think, like, it's amazing that you like survived and continued on through all of that, and I'm so grateful you did. And okay, you did eventually, like, lose that battle, but you won, like, so thousands of battles before that point.
Yeah.
So I like, it's tough, and, like, I'll always wish that I was able at some, just like, I kind of had that last minute intervention to try and, like, stop that from happening. But at the same time, I just think it's kind of a dead end you don't want to go down of regrets.
Do you, if you don't mind me asking, do you think it was inevitable that he was going to take his own life at some point?
So he tried before.
Did he?
And I didn't know that. The only thing I really knew about it was that there was one time he was messaging my mum, and then he stopped messaging her, and I was at my flat with her, and I was like, I'm going to go round. And then she's like, you don't know what you're going to find there. Like, so I was crying on the way to his flat, and then I got there, and he was alive. He was in a really sorry state. I, like, cleaned up his flat. I was like, let's, like, 'cause when you're depressed, you can't even, like, look after yourself. You can't even wash.
Yeah.
I was like, let's go out. And, like, it was just kind of funny. Like, it was such a, I say funny because there's a humor in it. I think you need to see humor. And we went out, and he, like, ordered a steak, and he was like, oh, well, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to buy the most expensive thing on the menu. Like, I don't know when I'm next going to be here. So, and I don't know, like, I think humor is, like, it's seen as offensive, but I think, like, actually it should kind of be, like, reclaimed as this. Like, black humor.
I think it depends on the person.
Depends on the person.
Because, like, I can totally hit it with black humor. Do you know what I mean? I'll use my dad dying as an excuse. I'm like, my dad died, so.
Yeah. And, like, it's like, so long as it's not, like, I think there's a difference. There's always that line, isn't there, of, like,
yeah, because there's some people that just, it's not for them, which is fair enough.
Totally understandable.
But it's a really great coping mechanism, to be honest. Like, being able to make jokes about it. Like,
I think
my flatmate and I hit it with the most, like, depressing, dark humour ever. And, like, I've, like what you were saying with, like, some of your friends, like, you have some that have lost parents.
Yeah.
I have quite a few that have lost parents, which is pretty insane. Like, two of my friends, their parent, dad and mum committed suicide, cancer, mostly cancer, like, which is, you know, like, to have that kind of, like, many friends that have lost a parent is insane. But, like, we all get the same humor, and like some of my friends that haven't lost a parent, when I hit with humor like that, they're like, do I laugh? Like, you know what I mean? They're like, is that okay to laugh? Or, like, they don't know whether to, like, they can add into it. And I'm like, go for it. Add to it. I don't want you to be sitting there, like,
feeling awkward.
Yeah.
Because I think it's interesting, because, like, I mean, I had, like, so we had, like, a life insurance payout and stuff, and I was, like, talking to a friend about that coming in. He was like, oh, Mr. Moneybags over here, and I was just like,
that's what I want to hear.
Yeah, it's like only he could kind of make that joke, but I was kind of like, you know what, like, that's, it's not denigrating his name, it's not saying anything bad about him, it's just trying to find some angle of, like, just, like, funniness in, like, what is like 100% like a tragic thing.
Yeah.
And I find it really strange, or I have found it very strange, like, how kind of humor and tragedy like sit totally side by side.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, completely.
There's been a lot of like just kind of funniness in the way things have played out, and yeah, I like yesterday I met up with my dad's brother, and we kind of had discussions about, you know, spreading his ashes. So
were they close?
They were really close. He left a note to him and to only him, and
wow.
So they had that kind of brotherly relationship, and we chatted about like spreading my dad's ashes and stuff. And then he was like, well, they had a family friend who my dad really loved. It was this guy called Ronnie. He's like 94 now. Aww. And he was like, Ronnie's in hospital. I don't know if you've heard. And I was like, Christ, like that's really bad. Oh, you know, if he's close by, me and my sister can go around and nip and see him. So we go to this hospital on the outskirts of Falkirk, and like, just like there's this like 94-year-old man. He's got all of his wits about him. He still remembers like me and my sister and like what we're up to, and he's just sitting there with like a broken hip, like kind of like dazed out on morphine, and he's like, you know, he's taking blood thinners, so he's like bruising all over his hands and his skin, and he didn't look great. And
yeah, you're really not painting a nice picture of Ronnie.
No, God bless him. But you know what? He was, when we were speaking to him, he's got such a vivaciousness and a humour about him, where he was like, oh, this is like, you know, just kind of like making light of the situation. And I just wonder if that's sort of the secret to like that kind of longevity is, you know, he still goes down to the pub, he still sees all of his friends. When we were there, like, someone came in and was like, oh, we've got you this card, and it's all the guys from the pub have like signed it. I can't wait to see you come back.
That's so nice.
Yeah, and it's just like, I just love that. And I think like, I sort of wonder if that kind of gets trained out of us a little bit, because it's like, oh, we have to treat this really seriously, and this is a really bad thing that's happened, so everyone has to be very austere. It's such a Victorian way of dealing with things, and why do we still do that?
That's such an interesting point, because my dad, like, that's so true. I never thought of it like that. You know, like my dad would like kind of make jokes about it. Like he'd be like, go make me a sandwich. I'd be like, no, and he'd be like, I've got cancer.
Yeah.
Like, stuff like that all the time. Do you know what I mean? But towards the end, so a month before my dad died, his cousin died of cancer, and she was incredible. And we went to see her like a couple of days before she died, and she was so at peace with it and so like ready, which is like, that's so crazy that like she just. And I still remember that day so clearly, because we were sitting in the garden. It was a nice day, and she was just so calm. And it was not that, like, it might have been like a week later she died. And I remember my dad being like, I wish I could be like that, because she was still cracking jokes and stuff, but I think that spooked my dad that she was okay with it. Yeah. And then he wasn't. Like, he was not ready to go. Like, he was, which like made me more sad, because I was like, you're not ready yet. But he wasn't. He was so determined to just hang on for longer and longer and longer, and I just didn't want to do that. Like, I was like, it's okay. Yeah. You know,
I sort of wonder if that, because there's always that kind of like adage or like kind of sort of old wisdom that like some people just want to like let go sometimes, and like, I don't know. I mean, like, I did a really interesting course at uni where we were like exploring like miracle healing and like the psychology of it, and like
that's insane.
And really interestingly, like they had a few people, because basically this is a place in France. I think you'll probably know what it's called. I can't remember off the top of my head. A lot of Catholics go on like pilgrimage
Lourdes.
Lourdes.
And I passed through it. It's a very nice
and
place.
People go there with all kinds of ailments and all kinds, you know.
You get miracle, yeah.
And what's really interesting is they've studied this, and actually sometimes if you have people sit down and visualize themselves in their head fighting the cancer cells, it has to like physiologically, I might be misremembering this, I'm pretty sure this is true. Fact check me on this.
Literally, all people with cancer, just imagine you fighting it and you'll be sound.
No, I think, but there's what I'm trying to say is there's a measurable difference in they basically saw an effect of the belief that they were fighting it, and perhaps I wonder if that kind of linkage between body and mind. And
to be fair, the human body's insane.
It's like, we don't understand.
We don't understand. I don't think we ever will. And the brain is like something that we're still trying to figure out. Do you know what I mean? So maybe.
Have you heard of like?
Maybe that's the answer. The cure for cancer, your brain.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, well, but I do think that there must be a kernel of truth in that. Of maybe. Like just that kind of. There's a lot of people that are just like ready to go, and they just kind of you see that, and then a calmness comes over them.
Oh yeah, like complete state of calmness. Yeah. Like she was just like so fine with it, and like still asking me questions. I was like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
Because I couldn't comprehend it. My dad literally couldn't handle it. My dad was like sitting there sobbing.
Yeah.
And that was tough to see, because I was like, "You fucking hell!" There was just so much going on that day. Do you know what I mean? And I think because his mental state was so, like, hers was calm, she was kind of fine with it. She was still happy, but his mental state was, I'm not ready, panic, anxiety, like scared, you know. So maybe like you said, like this whole belief, it's like maybe it's genuinely a mindset. Like, I'm not saying the cure to cancer is a mindset.
No, not at all. I think these things are all interlinked. Certainly, I just find it very fascinating, and I think in the case of like someone taking their own life, there's a very literal will to go there. And I sort of struggle with that a little bit, because it's just kind of thinking about like what kind of headspace must someone in, because that's terrifying. Like that is, I think that was terrifying to my dad even.
Imagine being in that, but like we'll never be able to, like, maybe, I don't know actually, I can't say we'll never be able to, but being in that state of mind where you're so not, you just don't want to be here anymore, that's so upsetting and so scary. And like, I think I was gonna ask, are you angry at your dad?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it forms part of the full kind of compendium of stuff, you know. I think that, yes, I'm angry. Of course I am. I just think, you stupid man. You stupid man. We could have fucking said fuck it and go on holiday somewhere and just like checked out of life for a little while and got you back up on your feet. You know what I mean? And it's just annoying, because it's a mistake, but it's an irreversible mistake. Because like I see stuff sometimes people post about suicide, and it's like there's no such bad thing as a bad life, only a bad day. And I do really think that, like, I've been in some dark corners, and it, like, once you've been through a few of them, if you can try and always like anchor yourself in the fact that brighter days do lie ahead. It might be a month, it might be a year, it might be 3 years, but like there will come a time when you'll be happy again. And I think like it's really tricky to kind of deal with just thinking about like the future and all the things that he's missing and not seeing anymore, all because, and it was literally a job decision that was like the final kind of the hair that broke the camel's back kind of thing, where he was agonizing over this decision of whether to hop ship to another job, and then
so that was the turning point.
Yeah, and then and then he turned down the job because he was like, maybe it's, you know, safer the devil you know kind of thing. And I think then he immediately regretted that decision, and I think that was the trigger. Yeah. And that's just fucking minor. That's so small. It's just like, it's a stupid job. And like, as his son, you must be like, what the fuck? You fucking idiot. Yeah. So yeah, in answer to your question, yeah, I'm angry at him because like, but it's really strange. It's like an anger of love. Like, yeah, I'm just like, you're like, I love you so much. Why did you do that? You silly bastard. Yeah. Why did you do it? In the same way that like a child might like write on the walls, you're like, you fucking idiot. But let's not do that again. But the problem is that there's not that corrective life lesson from it, because, you know, I do really think if he'd survived it, I think he and seen all of our reactions and seen all of his friends' reactions, that would have jolted him out of, at least for a little while. It would have definitely like been like a big life revelation of like, people need me here and they want me here, and I'm not useless and I have value, and people, you know. Yeah. Do you think he could have? This is like, you don't have to answer this, but do you think he could have pushed on? It's tricky to say. I mean, he was. The problem was I'd been doing my teaching diploma, so I was kind of. Were you in Scotland? In Scotland, yeah. So I'd literally just finished my final placement, so it was only like a week between me finishing that and him passing away. And that's really hard because like I was very, very busy and I knew that he was not in a good way, but I literally had so much on my plate of like being in my diploma, and that's just really challenging because it's like, oh man, like if I just wasn't busy, then I could have hung out with you more. And
But that is not like, and this isn't me saying this in a mean way, like none of this is anyone else's fault.
No,
but your
not.
dad's.
Yeah.
Because this is what he did.
Yeah.
And it's no one else, you know? And like that is like horrible to hear, but like your dad did this. And like I say this to my friends too, like, because if you're obviously going to say to yourself, what could I have done? Like, what could have changed this? Nothing would have, because like you're not in his mind, you know. And it's so shit, because you're obviously going to feel some sort of like responsibility for it, but like he made the decision, you know. Yeah,
I think you've got to. I think that probably one of the better mental tools that I have is to try and recognize when something's a dead end. If something's like unresolvable, like regret, I think it's important to give it the attention that it deserves, of like acknowledging it, and then being like, that's not going to lead anywhere healthy. Because
you couldn't have spent your life, you know, like checking in on him all the time.
Yeah.
Trying, like rushing over to him anytime you could, because you still got so much of your life ahead of you. You were doing your diploma. You were like.
And we hung out when we had the time. Like,
you know,
I did
you weren't
go
a
around.
bad son. Like, it's clear how much you loved your dad to pieces. And it's just, it's shit, because especially when it comes with to a parent, like you just assume they're invincible. Do you know what I mean? And that nothing really bad will happen to them.
Yeah.
And then when stuff like that happens, you're like, what the fuck? And I think it really puts things into perspective, you know. But you did everything you could. You were a good son. It's just, it's hard. It's shit. But like, Charlie, like, you are an incredible boy, and that what you wrote was very, very touching.
Thank you. Like, I just think it's all like, to kind of look back to like what we were saying at the beginning with like writing and stuff. Like, I've just like, because he taught me to write, you know, like that's literally like I know all the words that I do, and I know how to like write, because he was very interested in that part of, you know, I used to share stuff with him, and then he would like critique it in a very like kind of autistic manner of like oh that's wrong, that's not very good. I wanted to like kind of like offer me improvements, but maybe not in like a constructive kind of way. But
was he a good dad?
He really was, actually. I write in the eulogy about I could ask him any question, and he really was like Google before Google was a thing. Like, we would like, just from a very early age, I would always like talk to him about like the stock market and like just really like just like silly stuff like geography, history, religion, politics. Like, I remember being very young and I used to ask loads of questions, and
he must have loved that.
He
must have been like, my kids.
I think most parents would be like, shut the fuck up. Like, that's annoying.
Loved it.
But he would just like, I think that's always what's made me curious, is because that was never shut down. He loved answering questions and stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, I think in that respect, he was like a great dad, because like I really feel like I have a curiosity about the world, because from an early age, he kind of nurtured that in me and was just always so happy to like have those conversations and stuff. So, and
you'll have that part of him for the rest of your life.
100%.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like these things that you take from them. Like, my dad was like your dad, very intelligent man. Like, he made me like obsessed with reading books. Like, I love books. We had the same love for Stephen King.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Like, my dad and I actually spent like a full day going around this, like, I think it was this little village in England or like town, and they have like a book fair like every year. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
no, I
couldn't tell you the name of it. But we went round to every single book stall trying to find any Stephen King book that we could get. Bought them all. Like, wow, I have so many like old battered Stephen King books, and he taught me, like, he gave me my love for reading, and also like my curiosity for the world, because he was just like kind of like you. I just asked my dad everything and anything, because I just assumed he was right. Like, even though he could have been wrong, he could have been chatting right at his and I was like, wow, you're great. I just believed anything.
There's just that trust, isn't there?
Yeah,
like,
there is that trust,
and especially like a young child, like,
yeah.
Because I've seen it. Like, I've been on. I think there was one time I was on a train. It might have been after my dad had died, and there was this like wee boy that was like asking his mum. And I think his mum was really stressed. I don't want to like make any assumptions about like, you know, was she a bad mum or anything. But I think she was quite stressed and maybe had something going on. She was checking her phone and stuff. And like the wee boy was like, "Oh, who's driving the train? Like what? Like all these like little kind of like elemental questions, but things that he was very interested in. And his mum either like wasn't answering it or was like not now kind of thing. And that could have just been her on a bad day. Again, I caught a snippet of their day.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I do think that parents do really owe it to their kids to like not snuff that out, because I really think
don't
that
like dampen their curiosity.
Because I think like even with myself, like I'm like rediscovering like my creativity through writing, and I think that gets really like very early on. If you don't show like a kind of inclination and kind of expertise in being creative, school and just generally society will be like, nah, like you're not a creative type, so you just stick to like doing your thing and kind of stay in your lane.
Yeah.
But I actually think that everyone should have some form of creative outlet. Like I don't know what that looks like.
It's so good for
but
you.
Yeah, because like sometimes I just have some ideas and like I don't need to put them anywhere. Like I can just write for my own purposes.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yeah, like I've recently just taken to, because I find it harder and harder to like sit down in front of my laptop after like just staring at a screen at work all day. So sometimes I write on my phone instead. If I just have like a spare like 5 minutes, I'll just like jot down some notes.
And do you not write physically? I prefer to write physically.
No, not really. No, I'm quite like, I actually don't describe myself as a writer necessarily. Like I know I do, and like that's what I do. But I think my process, and it's quite bad. I need to get better at just writing, because I'm more of like a edit as you go kind of person. But sometimes I can get very lost in like, oh, that sentence isn't like quite right. Probably like an OCD sort of pattern behind it, I suppose. But I'm always kind of going back and like tweaking stuff, and I'm like, no, like focus on the sentence ahead and don't look back, because I can go back and edit.
Yeah.
The other paragraphs, they're going to be there when I'm ready to go back. But
have you ever thought about just like getting a piece of paper, literally word vomit onto it, and just leave it like that? Because in a way, like obviously, like I'm not saying that's going to cure you.
No,
there's
no.
more like, I think like the way of like letting it go and being like, I don't care if there's a mistake, like just getting messy. It kind of feels like I remember
to it, like
when my dad had an affair, I got my diary and I literally went crazy. Like I was like scribbling all over the pages. Like everything was bundling into one, and I was like, whew. Like in a way I was like, well, I need to go deal with that now. But like in a way I was like, I got like everything off of, like, it felt like some sort of therapy. And like writing therapy is insane. I don't think enough people talk about it. No,
because I think like there's the kind of classic thing of like, oh, like I went to see the doctor and they were like, go for a walk and take these pills kind of thing.
Or have a bath.
Yeah.
I went to CAMS. Do you know CAMS? It's like this like mental health clinic in Glasgow.
Oh, I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
Like I literally told them like I wanted to take my own life at one point, and I was bulimic. I really hated school. I was just going through a shit time, and they were like, okay, why don't you have a bubble bath? Maybe put a candle on, watch a nice film, and sleep.
Yeah, because the thing is that advice, it's really insufficient, but it comes from a good place. But it's like I think the main thing is that because mental health is really complicated and based on a multitude of factors, I think that it really needs to be a holistic thing of like not just the walks and not just the bubble baths or anything else that makes you feel good, but like a range of stuff. And like if you can get down like a routine that allows yourself space to breathe and gives yourself the time to look out for others, and just like, you know, taking walks or going into nature and like eating
getting
well
away from the city is
looking
such a
after
good
yourself idea. Like I just think that all together these things will really help, but individually they just, it's like a sticking plaster, you know. It doesn't, it's
like
not
when
going to do
they told
anything.
me that, they were like, how you feeling? I was like, I want to die.
Yeah.
They were like, have a bath.
I don't know, man. Like, I think a bath would be quite nice if you're feeling that way, like.
Yeah, like they were literally a mental health clinic, and I was like, okay. And now, like I think everyone's like journey with mental health is obviously so different, and like what helps and stuff. But like therapy has really helped me. Yeah. I wanted to ask you if you were in therapy. Yeah,
I started seeing a psychologist while I was doing teaching, just because I was really struggling with I was like getting like palpitations as I was like going to sleep at night. Just because I'm a massive perfectionist. Like I really hated lessons going wrong, but you actually have to fail at teaching to be a better teacher. Yeah. But that was really hard for me, like on a very like deep level. Going in every day, you spent like 2 hours prepping a lesson, and then the kids are just like they're a tough crowd. Like you know,
Kids are brittle.
Kids are brutal, and they also, the other thing is that kids don't. A lot of teachers said this to me. Kids don't realize this, but they actually really want a benevolent dictator that's going to like tell them what to do. When you have a classroom and you go in and you be really nice to them, but you don't like draw a line in the sand and say, if anyone crosses this, you're going to be in trouble, and enforce that. If you don't, then they start kind of creeping over that,
like pushing the boundaries,
and pushing the boundaries until you lose them completely.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying. Like, see, being in front of like 30 14-year-olds.
Oh, and you were doing like high school.
Yeah.
High school's like primary school. I could probably feel it, but high school though was awful.
It's something else. Like, yeah. And I also just think like no 14-year-old, or like there's a few, but like on a general level, a lot of 14-year-olds aren't aware of the changes that are happening in their brain and the emotions that they're feeling, and they will eventually come to understand those things and reckon with them.
But they're kids. But they're growing up.
Yeah,
they're going through puberty. And they're selfish.
Yeah. And I think the trouble is as well is that it's only really around the age of 16 that you start seeing your teachers more as like people. So like the younger students kind of don't really, like they simply haven't stopped to think about the fact that the lesson that I've put together and all the resources I've cut out had to be like prepared, and like that work went into it, you know. I think there's kind of, when you're that age, you just sort of, you show up in the class and you get taught a lesson, you're like, whatever, I don't care about this guy.
You just care about lunch.
Yeah, you're like, when's lunch? Like, what's my friend texting me? Like,
yeah.
You know,
that is like hard, especially because you're still young. Going in, and like I said, kids are brutal. Like even me walking past them in the street, I'm like, what are they gonna say? What are they gonna say?
Yeah.
Like a group of 14-year-olds are some of the nastiest people ever. So going in there and like asserting, like, you know, like, I'm the teacher, don't fuck with me. Do you know what I mean?
I just never comfortably fitted into that, and I think like I said, my dad passed just as I'd finished my diploma, and I was kind of like, it was bizarre. Like, I was waiting along because we had to wait for various things to be cleared with the police and like various stuff.
Like you were saying that it was a crime scene.
Yeah, and that's just a precautionary thing.
Okay, right, okay.
Because there's a man that is dead in a flat by himself, and there could be other factors that they've not. Okay. Usually, it's obviously what it appears to be, but sometimes like there might be something, I don't know. Yeah. So that, you know, as a degree of caution, so we had to wait for all that stuff to be cleared off, and I was not thinking about my dad. Like I was like, that was present in my head. I was staying up with palpitations about thinking of going back into teaching, because I was so anxious about like not having like the support of another teacher in the classroom to help me, and just being like plunged in baptism of fire style, like having my own lessons in a school. And it was weird. I let the university know, and I let the school know that I was going to be placed in. And I went into the department, and the woman was like, "You'd be amazed at the amount of teachers that come through this door, and they really like their subject, but they don't love working with children." And I was like, "That's me." Like, I really like teenagers, but I don't like working with teenagers. I think that's kind of, I draw a distinction between those two things. Like, I thought leading that classroom and being that authority figure just didn't really, I just wasn't taking to it very well. And I was really teaching because I just loved modern studies, and I just thought it was such a great subject. I was like, I just want the world to know about politics and like just kind of grand ideas of like, if I could get, you know, a generation of children that come through my classroom to like be really interested in politics, that would be the best thing I know of making like a direct change. And teaching does provide you with that fulfillment, but it comes with all the other baggage of like, it's one of those jobs you can't really leave at the door when you go home.
Yeah.
And I think I need to have that off switch, because I will just ruminate over like, oh, I said this, or that lesson didn't go very well, and oh, that person was acting up, I didn't really handle that situation. And that was what was keeping me up at night, as my dad had literally died, and I'm just like, this is just not for me. So I'm glad I've left, but
in a way, like, I'm not surprised that you were thinking about other stuff, because there's this massive thing that's just happened.
Yeah.
So obviously you're going to focus on the thing that's not as like awful and traumatic as that. You're like, I'm just gonna leave that for now, and I'm gonna focus on this, because that's like beyond me, that I can't even comprehend it.
Yeah.
It's so fair. Like, when my dad died, I was still like even like as he was down, I was like, oh god, where am I gonna go out next week? Like, where am I going for dinner? Like, because I couldn't like bring myself to look at it in the face and go,
yeah, right.
So this is actually just like, this is happening and it's going to happen next week. But like, I could not, like, you can't, when you're ready to, you can turn around and face it. But you're going to deal with the stuff that takes less effort. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, you still had to go back. Do you know what I mean? Like, no wonder you were still thinking about it.
Yeah.
And also, maybe you wanted to speak to your dad about it and you're like, this is even worse because now I need to deal with this, and then like I can't even talk to him. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because I literally texted him in the morning that he died, so we would have missed the text saying like what school I was going to, and I just kind of, I felt very lost, and I don't know. Sometimes when something like that happens though, I think like because I wouldn't have left teaching if he hadn't passed away. I think I'd probably still be doing it. Which
you wouldn't have liked.
Which I wouldn't have liked. And so I feel like I've made the right decision, but the only reason I had the courage to do so was because something so large had happened that kind of nothing really feels scary anymore, or as scary.
Do you know what I mean? I completely agree, yeah.
And I've spoken to a few people now about that, and I think there's a general consensus that when you have something with such gravity happen, sometimes you kind of get like things like that I would have agonized over, like a decision like leaving teaching just made sense, and I was very clear-headed about it. And I don't know about you, but I felt like surprised that I was obviously having very bad days and stuff, but like, were you kind of surprised about how you were handling it? Did you feel like, because I felt like I'm obviously not alright, but like I feel like I'm quite like, okay, I need to kind of get a grip on this situation and help my family through this and try and manage a lot of the kind of conflict that was happening at the time, because you think grief brings out the best in people, but it actually really doesn't. And that's a really hard truth that I think more people should talk about and know about, because when people are hurt, if it's a separated family like ours are, where I think with that, all those old grievances, all those old conflicts can really come to the fore.
I was not expecting that. I'd never thought of that before, you know. How was I with handling it? I think I just thought, like, still now I'm like, I need to keep my family together. But other people in my family haven't handled it well. Like you said, that it's brought out their bad sides. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, fair enough. Do you know what I mean? Like, something horrible's happened. We've watched my dad die for 6 years, and we literally saw him in a hospice like 4 days before Christmas. You know, like, no wonder you're acting the way you're acting. But in a way, I'm kind of scared that like it'll come. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe just later on in life, where like my bad side will come out. Like, everyone has a bad side. Do you know what I mean? But I think I smoked so much weed.
Yeah.
Like, so much weed. Like, my dad's funeral, I was high. Like,
no, really?
Yeah. Like,
Christ.
Yeah, I literally just couldn't hack it. I was so numb. Like, so numb. And then I smoked after the funeral with my best friend, like,
Jesus.
Like,
I don't know, yeah.
Outside the, like, where we were having like the dinner and stuff, I was like, I was like, I just need to smoke a joint right now. Wow. And I just smoked so much, like, and I was definitely addicted. Like, I don't smoke anymore just purely because I think it brings back how I was.
I get you. Yeah, I think it has that kind of associative effect.
So maybe that was my bad side.
Possibly, yeah.
Maybe it was just me being high like all the time, just numbing everything. Like, I smoked so much weed because I just could not handle being sober. Because even when you're high, you're just kind of like in this state of like numbness where you're just like,
it's an escapism aspect.
Yeah, you just don't feel anything. So I'd literally just get high and scroll on TikTok and laugh at the most ridiculous videos and then sleep. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it was like that. I was just like functioning like a zombie just to get by. Like, it was like an autopilot. And now that like I've stopped smoking weed, I think that's why I'm so emotional. Like, I was saying before we started recording that like I'm so much more emotional now than I was before, because I think I was high, so I didn't really feel anything. Yeah. And now that I'm sober, I'm literally like, anything can set me off.
Right.
Like, yeah. I've been holding back tears here.
Well, I mean, because it is challenging with I'm trying to think where to take this point. Sometimes I start a sentence and I'm like,
oh, that happens to me all the time. Don't worry.
No, so yeah, to come back to the kind of the changes I suppose you've noticed. Like, I think I feel like more like stoic than before. Like, I think like I was kind of a bit of a idiot before, like a year ago. I mean, teaching was helping me mature and kind of grow into like my adult self, or like could transition from that sort of uni phase of like all that really mattered was like clubbing and like just having a good time, to then like, okay, serious things are happening, and then to take the other leap of like, my dad's just passed away.
It makes you grow up.
Fucking overnight, yeah.
Literally, it's just like, and then you're like, right, okay, well now I need to like look after my family, think about them all the time, sort my life out, make sure nothing like this happens to anyone that I love. You know, just be on top of things all the time.
And that's kind of like a large like sort of weight to have on your shoulders, because I know it's sort of like a patriarchal sort of view of like, but there's like the kind of like man of the house trope, right? Yeah. And I think to a degree I've kind of been living that anyway with my mum and my sister, because my dad like obviously moved out. He was still very much a father, so I'm not saying there's any like deadbeat dad tropes going on, but like just in terms of like the being the like male figure in the household has been like, that's something I have lived. But now it's like I feel like an even higher step up of like, I don't feel there's a lineage that can be traced between me now and then me a year ago.
We've talked about this,
but it's I feel like a different person. I really do. Like the things I value, the things I think matter have completely changed. And
I think there's Charlie before and there's Charlie after. Like there's Gabrielle before and there's Gabrielle after, and we are not connected. Yeah. Like the only connection we have is the grief before and the grief after. It's the grief that's like holding like that together.
Pinching that together.
Yeah, pinching that together, because like you said, like values and everything. But even like, I think it's different to you because yours is like out of nowhere. Like I started to like become a bit different, and then it was like a overnight switch, like, oh right, now I am completely different. Like I kind of like left that old like idiot, like going out all the time, like just doing whatever to like
getting up to a bit of malarkey. That's what you need to do when you're in your early 20s. And I think like when you lose a parent this early on, it feels like an acceleration towards a point of like, not even maturity, because like I think maturity can't happen quickly.
It's like an acceleration.
But it is an acceleration.
It is like a little like speed up, like as in like you're gonna get there a bit quicker than everyone else, because like I think I have definitely changed. I've matured a lot. Like I'm way more switched on with things, and I have so much more empathy.
Yeah, like that's the other thing.
Like as soon as anyone's having a bad day, I'm like, don't you worry. Like, do you know what I mean? Like I just feel so much more empathetic towards people than I did before. Like before, I've always been an empathetic person, but now I feel so much more. I don't know. I also feel people's feelings more, I think. Like I've always been someone to take on other people's feelings, which isn't like ideal, but like I don't know.
I think with stuff like that, it's really interesting, because maybe to look it all back to like traits that I've noticed in my dad, traits that I've noticed in myself. I think like there's certain aspects of like, if you can learn to like tame and make work for you some of the habits that you have, that if they take it to the logical extreme, if you're taking on everyone's problems, you're going to be overloaded yourself, and you're also not going to have any time to reckon with your own issues. But then maybe if you learn to kind of like healthily manage that and kind of deploy it when you see right to do so, and kind of be more conscious about how you use that, that's really powerful, and that's like great. And I think sometimes there's a strange, I wrote in my eulogy about my dad being obsessed over detail, and it meant that he never missed a beat on whether it was people's birthdays or whether there was like something that he would just kind of note, like little things that he would notice. He was a very observant and precise person. The flip side of that, take it to its logical extreme, is getting catastrophizing over the smallest thing going wrong. So even when there's like a relatively small thing, like, you know, making a slightly wrong career decision, or a career decision that he felt to be wrong, that just, he couldn't handle that. Like that moment was just like the kind of trigger point. And I think like we all have those things, and I sort of wonder like some of the things that I struggle with. There's a flip side to it, you know, like there's always these kind of, yes, I do this, but if I kind of learned how to channel it and funnel it down paths that are more healthy, those are the parts of my personality that make me who I am. And I sort of wonder if there's always that kind of element between like suffering and then also those things that I consider to be like your talents, you know. If you kind of take those things to like their logical extremes, they end up being really bad. You know. I don't know where I was going with that, but I suppose just like a general.
I like that. What else do you think you've taken from your dad?
I'm not sure. I think definitely like. So this is the other thing as well. Is like during. So my dad had a. I don't want to super go into this because I think like some family stuff should just stay family stuff. But I'll talk in very general terms because it has formed a huge part of like the very difficult journey that I've had over the last year. But my dad had a partner who was he was seeing and had been seeing for I think like 6 years there and thereabouts.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah,
That's
so like a while, or maybe like 5 years. And she's been very difficult to handle and deal with. She found my dad, so first of all, the first thing I would say is that I have deep empathy and sadness for how hard and difficult that would have been. Because, like I said earlier in the conversation, it's an abstract thing for me. He just isn't here. Where she literally like has tangible memories and evidence of the fact that he's died, right? So that's hard. She's dealing with that, and then she was kind of being very kind of forceful and assertive during the funeral planning process. It really wasn't. It was stepping on a lot of people's toes, and I was trying to manage. What I'm trying to say to link it back to my dad is he was a lawyer. He was very fair-minded. He was extremely diplomatic. My mum told me this funny story of like they were around at a friend's house and like I think they were like sitting outside having a laugh, and then like someone peered over the fence. It was like, "Can you keep the noise down?" Like it, blah blah. And this whole like feud erupted because she was like, "You blocked my planning permission for the house." And it was like all these like neighbourly stuff that had just like escalated.
Yeah.
And my dad basically was the only adult in the room that was like, "Can we all just like talk about this and settle down?" You know. So I've always admired like his diplomacy and just that ability to. You might have an opinion. And it's important to express that and to be assertive when doing so. But I also think that, so in the case of my dad's partner, she acted inappropriately, and without getting into too much detail, she's really caused us a lot of further grief and further harm from her actions. But and I can find that, you know, bad. I can think
what's
that's
her bad side, like you said, people's bad sides
precisely,
like with my dad's partner as well.
I
saw a bad side.
And so with that, for me to be diplomatic in that situation and to try and manage the fact that, you know, my mum is grieving for her ex-husband
and the father of her children,
father of her children, my dad's brother and my dad's side of the family sort of, I don't want to say siding with my dad's partner, but maybe not being entirely fair towards my mum in turn. Me being diplomatic is literally what my dad would have been like, and so I see it as like very, very important to carry on that legacy of like fair-mindedness and diplomacy in his name. And it was very direct in the funeral thing because it was like, you would have wanted me to do this. And I got a lot of shtick from fucking everyone. They were like, "Why are you siding with them?" I was like, "I'm not siding with anyone. I just want to make sure." And I said to my dad's brother, I was like, "I'm going to organise the funeral because I'm the only person that will make sure that everyone's story gets heard." And I curated this humanist ceremony. And
it's what your dad would have wanted.
And it's what he would have wanted.
And that's what people were forgetting. Is like, obviously everyone's grieving, but like at the end of the day, like someone has died and everyone is upset. Yeah,
and so I just think that. Continuing on just that kind of emotional maturity of being angry. Like I was angry at her, but
you would.
But when she sent over stuff to be included in the words from the humanist minister, I made sure that had a place in within that speech, because her perspective. My dad loved her as much as I don't care for her, and I think that she's, at least during that time, she wasn't being a nice person. My dad loved her, and then like if that makes me uncomfortable, it doesn't fucking matter. Like my opinion on that doesn't matter. She had to have a place within that ceremony and that kind of grieving process. So
of course,
so I think that's the main thing for me. What do you think that like you've taken from your dad, or what's like a real value that it could be a good or a bad thing, I guess, or like something that you've continued on?
The bad part definitely being stubborn. My dad was so stubborn.
Wow, okay.
I'm very stubborn. And also I think we were both just very hot-headed
Right?
Yeah.
I don't see that for you. I don't
Really?
know. No, I don't know.
So hot-headed.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he was really hot-headed too. They're, like, definitely the bad traits, but like also in a way like you could see them as like in a good way as well. Like I'm hot-headed as in like if I don't stand for something and I think something's unfair, I will speak up. Do you know what I mean? Like
quite right.
I'm the first person, like if I'm on a night out and there's a guy being weird to my friends, you best believe I'm in his face, like screaming at him.
That's good.
And stubbornness, like I don't know, like standing up for what I believe in. You know? So in a way, teaching me that, but he also taught me. I think one of the best things my dad has ever said to me was, because whenever I was really upset in school and like I really wasn't having a good time, he always asked me, do you like everyone you meet? And I'd say no. He's like, well, how can you expect everyone to like you? And that is something that he taught me, and I still remember it all the time, and it kind of keeps me grounded in a way, because I'm like, why does this person not like me? And I'm like, well, I don't like everyone, and also I don't even like them. I just care more the fact that they don't like me. You know what I mean? So I think that's really stuck with me. So that's definitely taught me. And also with it, I think I've definitely got his humour. He was really, really funny. Yeah. Not saying that I'm really, really funny, but
you're so funny, Gabrielle.
I'm hilarious. But I think his type of humour definitely stuck with me, and he was very generous. I feel like I'm quite a generous person. Like he's probably the most generous person I've ever met. That was kind of his way of showing love. It was his generosity.
Like giving.
Like, but not even like necessarily like materialistic things. Like he was always looking out for people. So like he worked for Pernod Ricard, which is an alcohol company, and like people that were like people I knew and were like looking for work experience. Like even if he didn't know them, like I had a friend who was looking for work experience, but I just said to my dad automatically, was like, yeah, of course, sorted that out. Like stuff like that, and just like checking in on people, like that sort of generosity, being like, I'm present, you know, like that. He was always present.
Interesting. Do you mean in like a sort of mindfulness sort of way, or
definitely.
Have you ever done like that kind of stuff, or like
I tried. We did it in school.
Did you
we had
really?
this like mindfulness person come in, and we had to like
interesting, have
a Malteser in our mouth, but like really taste the Malteser and like close your eyes and they're like, feel the chocolate going down your throat.
Are you sure this just wasn't like the Mars company like doing like some sort of weird PR stunt? Maybe. Well, that would be really smart. Actually,
it would be, but they got rid of our vending machines at school.
Oh shit!
Yeah, no, bad chat. But yeah. So I think I got like the generosity aspect, and also just being like present with my dad. You know. Right. I think, no one's ever asked me that. It's really nice to talk about that. Because no one really asks me things like that. Like even like
because sometimes it can just focus on the very like people are like, are you alright?
Yeah.
And it's like I actually probably that almost seems like kind of a peripheral thing to talk about. I'd probably rather reminisce and like think about things in a more like I've always been like that though. Like I'll be the type at like an after party to just like. Chat about politics or
5 a.m. philosophy. Well, the Tories.
It's like 6:30. I'm just like, do you know elephants like grieve for their dead and hold funerals?
Stop, do they actually?
Yeah, I think they do. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they have like rituals and like follow the moon and stuff. It's really weird.
Wow.
They reckon that in a very elemental sense, elephants have like religion for the moon and stuff.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look into that. Sorry, going back to your point about like talking about like the good things and stuff. When I bumped into your sister, it was literally like right next to the Meadows in Edinburgh, and like we just got into like the deepest chat within like 3 seconds. I was like,
right.
How the hell are you? Like,
I think that's something from my dad as well. Like there was nothing. We would just be like hanging out, and he's like, "So what do you think of like the Ukraine war?" And then we'd like just like have a chat about like the geopolitical ramifications. Then that might take like 5 minutes. I think that's just what I miss. Like because we got to the point where we were like just best friends. Like I would go around to his, we would like play tennis or do like I actually took him climbing once, and like I'm just so glad I got to do that just once. You know, just because like he was like he loved doing new things. He was a really adventurous person, and I loved doing new things with him. Like we would never like to go to the same restaurant twice. It was always like, let's go here, let's do this, let's try this new food. And I think that's a really lovely way to live your life. Because it can never be boring. There's always those like new experiences you can have. And I suppose like, you know, we got to the stage where taking away some of the other things that the grudges that I held and the grudges that he held, you know, we would go out for pints, and I'd stay over at his, and like we'd just like set up, like we'd come home from the pub and like crack open like more beers and just like sit chatting, and it's like a weeknight. We're just like up till 2 a.m. chatting about like life and like
and he
philosophy.
would have loved that he had a son like that.
Totally, like we were like really cut from the same cloth. Well, I was cut from the same cloth as him in that regard. Like just totally take after him in that like. Just very, I've just always been like someone that like ponders stuff, and I think he was the same. So it's just really nice to have. I've been like, this sounds like a really strange thing to get upset about, but like, see when like Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, and then like all of the kind of political happenings and all of the like new.
I know, yeah.
These are things I would have spoken to him about, and I get really like sad now that I've never met anyone that had his perspective on like politics, and I feel like I've absorbed some of it, but there's just so much we didn't discuss and never got round to, or new things that will happen that I'll never know his perspective on it, because it was always a unique perspective that I hadn't heard anyone else.
Interesting you say that, because that's the exact same relationship I had with my dad.
Really, right?
Yeah, I'm actually getting a bit emotional about it, because he's exactly who I would have gone to, and it's so funny you mentioned stuff about Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, because when that happened I went, I can't even speak to my dad about this.
Yeah.
The first person I would have come and be like, have you seen this?
Yeah.
This is mental.
That was mental.
And even Nicola Sturgeon leaving, I was like, where's my dad? Like,
yeah,
I need to speak to him about
that was another one the other day.
this.
I was just like, oh gosh, that's like end of an era kind of stuff. Like, because again, just like, and he would apply that fair-mindedness to politics as well. So there was never, he really was like, just like, there's like a trope called like centrist dad, which is just like a dad that like doesn't really take sides in like politics and kind of like stays in the middle. And he was just so that, like,
was he?
Yeah, he kind of like, he saw like aspects of like all different beliefs that he could like take from and sort of like think about. And yeah, I don't know, like, do you think that your dad had like a unique perspective that you miss, or like how would he like, I mean, yeah,
I think it was more just, I think he definitely had like a unique perspective, because everyone has a unique experience in life, and like growing up in a small town in Ayr, moving to Glasgow, you know, like losing mum and everything. Like when we would talk about things, like he would say things like, oh, I never thought of it like that. Like when we talked about politics, because I was so like black and white with stuff like that. Cause like, you know, when you're like surrounded with like-minded people your age that like all, you know, hate the Tories, like, you know, all that stuff. I was so surrounded like that, and I was so like set on that. Not saying my dad was a Tory, he wasn't, but
no.
He you know, opened my mind up a bit more. I'm like, oh, interesting, never thought of that. And he always really like he explained things so well for me to like actually understand it, because there's some things that happen in politics I'm like, I can't wrap my head around this, but he'd put it in a way where he knew I'd understand, and I loved that. Because now I read things and I'm like, I just wish I could hear what he would say, you know, and
sort of explain that,
and explain it better. But yeah, he was an incredible man, and I think it's really upsetting, because I get really upset at the thought that my kids, when I have kids, they'll never be able to experience him as a granddad, because he would have been great, you know. That
still makes me very, very, that's probably the sorest point of all, actually.
It's like the traditional stuff, like being a granddad, even like
walking my sister down the aisle when she gets married.
Yeah, like I asked my brother if he would do it the other day. He was like, "Why are you thinking about that?" And I was like, "Just so I can prepare."
Please, like,
yeah, literally. Yeah. It's like that sort of stuff that like really gets you. I'm like, but that, because that's what's meant to happen. Like, say meant, you know. Yeah. But like that's what you think is meant to happen. That's what society tells you is meant to happen. And like and then in a way, when this sort of stuff happens to you, you kind of feel like an outsider to society, because you're like, I don't really fit into this mold that we're supposed to go into, this like nuclear family and like stuff like that. And like, I know it's becoming a lot more common that people are like talking about it and stuff, but you still kind of feel like you're observing from the outside. That's how I feel anyway. Yeah,
or like just the kind of, because no one in my work actually even knows like I'm a new job, and it's just never come up. But like, you know, there's often stuff like you'll hear about people speaking about their dads, and it's like, gosh, like I'm not gonna be one to sit here and say like don't do that, because like you're just talking about your dad, like it's fine.
It's stuff like that.
It is upsetting.
Yeah,
it's kind of, I mean, it's possibly more for suicide. Maybe I'm kind of thinking that I'm unique in this sort of way, but I do think that like the language around this has really upset my sister. It's just like the casualness, kind of even coming back to the point about OCD, people being like, oh, a lot of people are like, oh, like I was at the library the other day, I just wanted to like kill myself, and it's just like, fuck. Like,
yeah, my friends have that as well.
I don't want to be that like rude dick. It's
I don't
like
think that's
actually like my dad killed himself, and you shouldn't like.
I don't think that's rude at all. I think that's so valid.
It is valid, and it's interesting. Like the more like, even if you think of the words, my sister told me this. When you say commit suicide, that's because suicide used to be a sin, so you commit sin. So even that, you know what I mean? Like,
really?
But words can be so embedded in, because you wouldn't like commit a good act. Like commit has a more like kind of like negative tone to it, right? Like it's something you kind of do, right? And I think like it's interesting how language can get so embedded where if my sister hadn't even told me that, I wouldn't even have thought of that.
That's
like,
crazy. I never knew that. So
it's kind of hard because I think like that will take a really long time to change. My approach is just to say to everyone, like, don't be aware of your language, and when someone says that something's upsetting, I'm not going to call you out. I'm just going to try and raise awareness of it and hope that through positive change, rather than like coming, because people just say these things, and I would have said these things like a year ago, and we all use language that is problematic in some way, and I
yeah, completely. And like in a couple of years time, I'm like, I can't believe I used to say that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And
what would you rather people said? Like,
my preferred term would just be like, he took his own life. Taking, I think that's got a softer.
I was gonna say it sounds way softer than committing suicide. It's so harsh.
Yeah, or even like passing away from suicide, because like a lot of people reasons come up because there's the idea that this is a choice, and I sort of wonder, like, I guess it depends how much you think we have free will, and that's a whole other deep conversation for an after party maybe. But definitely, like, I wouldn't ask why if he died of like liver cirrhosis, or I wouldn't be like trying to investigate or like dwell on the causes of it if he had like a brain aneurysm, because some of these things just happen. And I sometimes wonder with like all the kind of confluence of stuff, because it is more messy, and there's an element of like, oh well, he's decided to do this, but it was like based on like real factors that were like influencing him. So I do kind of wonder, like, I suppose it comes back to that inevitability point, like how much free will do we have? Like, are these things like kind of predetermined? And I don't know, like I've found myself thinking even bigger since my dad passed. I don't know if you have any reflections on this, but like where's he gone? Like what's happened to his consciousness? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to get like too wanky and like philosophy soon, but like
no, it's not wanky.
I want to hear your thoughts. Like, what were your beliefs before? Have they changed?
I never had any beliefs before. I think, like, to be honest, a lot of my life I've been surrounded by death. Like, ever since I was young. Like, it's never really, I just kind of was like, oh, okay, that's really shit and sad. But, like, I never really thought much further into it. But now, like, now that my dad's passed, I think everyone likes the idea that there is something bigger, you know? There's, like, a sense of hope. Of like there's comfort in the idea that there's something after this. Like, I'm not just gonna disappear. So I'd like to think, I don't really believe in, like, I'm not religious or anything. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not something that I believe in. I don't think that there is somewhere where we necessarily go and we're like, you know, heaven, where we're like floating about in the clouds and stuff. But it would be nice to think that there's like another world happening. You know, just somewhere where, like, one day you'll be reunited with all your loved ones, you know? Where you'll be reunited with your dad and Rosa, your dog. It's just nice.
I sort of wonder, like, if you can almost say like a kind of like scientific look at it, but still have the belief of like some kind of transfer, but like in a sort of way that's like, so take like the things we were talking about, like values. Like, I really think that is them living on in a kind of very literal sense. Like, a part of them is literally living on for you by living in you. Embedded, and then that might ripple outwards and like become harder and harder to trace back to its source, but like everyone has left their mark on the world, and everyone has passed values onto others, influenced others,
and that's what grief is, in a way.
How so? Like,
well, I mean, leaving the marks, that is grief in a way, you know.
Like that kind of
that, and like grief is horrible, right? But in a way, like, it's what kind of keeps him alive, and like is kind of like a symbol of how much you loved them and how
Precisely.
important they were, is that grief that you will carry, because grief will never go away.
Yeah.
It will be with you for the rest of your life. It just, you grow around it, you know. It's like a little tree. I don't know.
Yeah,
like
no, I get you.
You've got like a tree in your, I see it's like a tree in my belly that's this grief, and I'm just like still living around this tree.
Yeah.
You know.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, this tree in my stomach. It's weird, but I just feel like I'm growing around the grief and like still moving, but it's still there, and I don't think it necessarily is gonna like minimize in size. I think it will always be the same grief. It's just you're learning. You just have to go on with it, you know. Coming off of like talking about grief and things, and like I think everyone's experience with grief is obviously completely different. What advice would you give people? Because I think, like I said, everyone's experience is different, so everyone's advice is going to be different. Yeah,
because it's tricky, because I actually don't fully subscribe for everyone. Like, there's no secret formula, and it could well be that if you experience grief, it might be the first time that you've ever had any difficulties with like emotions and large things. Because for a lot of people, they've never had that. I kind of find that really strange. I'm like, what do you mean you just live a life and you're like not having any emotional distress? That's crazy.
Yeah, that must be nice.
That must be nice. How does it feel being God's favorite?
Yeah, literally.
You know. So I don't know. Like, I think for grief, first of all, you've got to kind of like just activate your social all the social support that you have and you have access to. Activate it. Let people know. Let them know how you're feeling. Let them know what you need. And I would honestly even say maybe my advice actually wouldn't be for the person, because if they know how to ask for help, then that's fine. My advice would more be for kind of everyone else, like supporting other people for grief. If your friend has like gone through something like that, it depends on the person. You've got to read, because some people don't want to talk about it, and I get that. But at least for me, I think the most, like, it's actually really, it's not even, words fail us. So people are like, I'm sorry that's happened. It's like, what are you saying sorry for? Like, you didn't do it.
Yeah, I know.
But people don't know what to say, and I don't blame them, because like words just fail us at times like that. Get a sense of how the other person is feeling. Are they open about it? Will they need a bit of time? If that is the case, you could just even offer to just like do like a food shop for them or something. Because like for the first few days, we didn't leave the house.
Oh, I had so much lasagna on that.
It's so much lasagna. God above. And I think just like offering practical support. So, you know, can I give you a lift somewhere? Do you need any advice with this, or like are you handling it okay with the lawyers? Like, do you need like anything you can offer them
just to make their life a bit
just
easier?
Make their life a bit easier, yeah.
Take a bit of like stress off.
Yeah,
because so much happens when someone dies. There's so much to deal with. It's insane.
There's like the kind of thing that's like sadmin of like having to do all the like the admin stuff. Yeah, sadmin. That's horrible. Yeah,
but I love that.
It's kind of an interesting phrase, because like you don't realize like for example, like this is a bad one, but like LinkedIn kept up like his profile, and we're like, oh, like Colin's been at so and so company for like 6 years now, and everyone was like commenting, being like, oh, that's so great, Colin, I've not heard from you in a while. It's like, he's dead. Like, Jesus. Yeah, and I don't know how we're gonna tell him that. So we had to
comment on LinkedIn, just like, you know, I'm his son, and he's passed away.
Yeah, and so like so like I think there will be a lot of dealing with that, and like even just like something from like cancelling their Wi-Fi to like
it's
handling the funeral. There's loads of stuff to do. So I would say probably the most important thing in the short term, practical stuff.
Yeah.
In the long term, emotional stuff. And it doesn't even have to be a case of like kind of awkwardly dawdling around the edges and be like, you're all right? Mm-hmm. Like just be honest and open. And if you get the sense that the person is not, because I think sometimes it feels alienating when people are tiptoeing around you and like. At least for me, just ask me. I'm more than happy to speak about it. I wouldn't have come on a podcast and spoken for this long if I like speaking about him. But you've got to take it. Just varies from person to person. Some people will need a bit more time, but that's probably my closing thoughts on that.
Oh, Charlie, thank you so much for coming on.
This has been a great use of the Sunday, hasn't it? Yeah, I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for having me. It's been nice to just get all this off of my chest, because this would have taken a very long time to write, but it's easier to kind of just speak out loud and riff off, and things might not go anywhere, but that's what podcasts are for. So
that is what they're for. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.